Hello, good evening everyone. Can you guys hear me? If you guys can hear me, please drop something in the chat.
Can loud and clear.
Loud and clear? Okay. So, welcome everybody to our 10th meetup of the Ministry of Testing Kuala Lumpur. So, my name is Ram. I'll be your host for today. So, today's agenda will be introduction and welcome to Ministry of Testing. And then today's speaker will be Ashish, where he will be speaking about a topic called how to set up successful automation from scratch. Okay, so followed by that, we will have our 99 seconds talk or our Q&A, and then we will wrap it up. Okay, so let's first take a look into our first one, which is Ministry of Testing. So just a small introduction. Ministry of Testing is the biggest online software testing community out there. So where you could learn a lot of things through their content and resources, where we have access to their full catalogs, articles, talks, podcasts, courses. Ministry of Testing also provide an excellent platform for you to do networking with the community, where you can do it through their club. You can join the MoT Slack, testers chat, feeds, and newsletter. Besides that, they also host multiple events which you can join. One of the most famous one is Test Bash, meetups, Mastery of Ministry, master classes, testing, Ask Me Anything. Also, if you guys feel like you guys want to contribute to the community, you can also write, speak, teach, review, and advertise. So for more information, you guys can just hop into the website of Ministry of Testing and check it out. Okay, so before we jump into the main agenda, I just want to remind a few simple principles which we want to follow today. Firstly, be human, be kind, be respectful, be supportive and inclusive, and most importantly, be open-minded. So with all that, without further ado, I would like to introduce Ashish to present how to set up successful automation from scratch. Ashish, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you can take over.
Hope you guys can hear. I think mic clear. And let me just start sharing my screen.
Yes.
Can you guys see my screen? And
yes, we can see.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ram, for such a good introduction. I think this is the first time having a session something like this in KL. So yeah. Hi guys. Today I wanted to talk about how you set up successful automation from scratch. I'm not gonna go very too much into technical aspect. Wanted to basically touch base on your on an organization level. This is very important to understand why it's first to understand why it fails, and different aspects of having a successful automation. So yep. So before we proceed, a quick intro about myself. I've been working close to 8.5 years experience in QA and automation. Currently leading the automation team with 𝗟𝗲𝗿. Previously in Malaysia, I've also worked with Astro, and previous to Malaysia, I've worked with in India, I've worked with companies like Amazon, Practo, and ClearTrip. I've been really fortunate to have worked with major of the product with giants in India. So yep, that's me. So yeah. Before we begin, I think it's always important to understand the basics of what is automation, what are the types of automation, and also touch base on what are the different frameworks. So yeah, I don't want to talk about what is automation. Rather, I would, I'm sure, pretty much everyone's aware what is automation. Rather, I would want to talk about a little bit more on the types of automation. So basically, there are a lot of different types, and the classification is not a what do you say, you don't have a straightforward rule. I mean, different companies follows different types of automation. I think there are tons and tons. The most common ones I've listed here. The first types of automation testing is definitely the unit test. I think these days unit tests have started picking up a lot of interest across companies. So basically, what a unit test is are the tests written by devs, mostly to test out the quality of the code they write. Basically, they test their unit part of the codes. It's not mostly into functional, but it is rather the unit, or rather the quality of the code. So yeah, those are your unit tests. Then you have your API test. I think we all understand what are APIs. Basically, or any network calls which happen during be it a web app or be it a mobile app. So any interaction to the networks, or basically to the service, or to the to the applications, backend application, is via the API test. So API automation is also picking up a lot of interest. Primarily because it's a lot easier to start with, and also it's a lot more reliable. When I say reliable, because you eliminate the risk of UI test, flaky UI test, because most of the new application, whenever there is a new application being built, generally the UIs are the last ones to be the stable ones. So that's why API tests are also picking up a lot of interest. Then you have your regression tests. They are similar to what we do in manual. Basically, I think one of the prime reason why automation is advocated for in a company is mainly to cover your regression test, because these are your major chunk of your testing, where you are repeatedly testing the same functionality or the same test cases over and over again. So that's your regression test. Then you have your smoke automation test, basically your core functionality, I would say. So rather than generally, in most companies, regression tests are usually longer ones. So that's why your smoke and sanity comes into picture whenever there's a minor changes. So you will have your sanity test as well. So they are kind of interrelated, you could say. Smoke and sanity is just that we use it at a different context. Then, of course, you have the major tests are nothing but your web test, which is a UI interface automation test, which covers your web and mobile. So yeah. Now coming to tools and framework. I think if you Google it out, I think there are like tons and tons of tools. I don't want to talk about, or rather deep dive more into the kind of tools available, but I would definitely want to talk about a few of them here, which are the most commonly used. Of course, the first one is the Selenium WebDriver. I think this is probably undoubtedly the legend for all your web applications, a go-to tool for all your web automation, and it's an open source tool, and it has a lot of support in the community, and it's a pretty mature tool to and I'm sure you can't go wrong with Selenium WebDriver. So there's always a solution for it. Then next is your APM. APM is similar to your Selenium. It's just that APM is rather used for your mobile application, be it native or be it hybrid or be it your mobile web app. So yeah, APM is, and also it supports your cross-platform, which is your Android and as well as your iOS. And there are the next set which I want to talk about is which are picking up again in the recent time, which is based on JavaScript. Since most companies, they are switching for your front end and your back end to JavaScript, and companies are moving towards JavaScript direction. So you have a lot of new frameworks being developed across for different JavaScripts. Like you have WebDriver.io, Zest. I think Zest is pretty popular among big giants like Facebook, Twitter. Then you have Protractor for specifically for your Angular ones. Then you have your Nightwatch. So you have different tools for your JavaScript as well. I think these are the common ones. There are few more as well. Then you have something called robot framework. So robot is again underlining your Selenium itself, but it's more on your Python based. It's not what do you say, a robot framework, and your Calabash framework is something which is readily available. It is just like a plug and play types, so that's why it is also gaining a lot of popularity, because your entire framework is already been made. All you need to do is just utilize them and tweak them as per your needs. So that's where I think robot and Calabash is also picking up. Then you have another tool called Catalan, which is on similar lines. Then you have your for your traditional desktop application, you have your Ranorex, AutoIT, the UFD, the traditional HP QTP ones, and of course your WinApp driver, which is again based on your Selenium. So yeah, I mean the list goes on and on. I think I think it's huge choices you have. So coming to what is an automation framework? So I think this is something which is probably most misunderstood kind of a concept. People think it's something very big. To be very honest, automation framework in a layman language is nothing but a guideline for having your code standards, or basically your structuring your automation work. What we do, like how we structure your manual test cases in a way of there's a process to it, right? So even in terms of framework for automation, it's the same. It's basically a guideline to actually have setting up the coding standards, or setting up your basically setting up your code structure so that you could reuse them more meaningfully, scale them whenever required when your application gets big. So that's your in a nutshell what the automation framework is. Now coming to different types of automation framework. So you have again the list is it varies from there are a lot of others as well, but I want to cover the most common ones. The first one is obviously your linear one. So linear automation framework is nothing but writing your code or writing your test script in a linear way, or in a sequential way. This is probably the most easiest way, and by far the most inefficient way. I mean, it's good for a beginner who wants to get started, who wants to learn more about automation. I think it's always good. We can you could probably explore on this kind of framework and understand, and that's where you get to understand, okay, why you require a structure. So yeah, linear is for them. Then you have something called keyword driven. Keyword driven is more on basically you segregate your test cases based on keyword, or you have your your steps written as keyword, and subsequently you have all the definitions or all the implementation of those keywords in a separate code, in your separate code. So you write all the keywords in, it could be in a simple Excel, or it could be a property file, or it could be even in your Java class, or any programming file you're using. So you define all your keywords in it, and then subsequently you actually write the implementation of it. So that's your keyword driven. The advantages of a keyword driven is so basically any manual QA who are new to automation, who can actually start writing tests using the keyword driven. Obviously you require an expertise for actually implementing the keywords, but once you have someone implementing the keyword writing test scripts for manual QAs, becomes a lot easier. So that's your keyword driven. Next you have your data driven framework. This is more on so basically you write your test scripts separately and you segregate your test data. That could be in the form of Excel, or you could store it again in the form of config properties, or you could store it in any ways, so that your test scripts is independent to your test data, so that you could reuse the same script rather than writing new scripts for the for different test data. So that's your test. So that's your data driven. Then you have your behavior driven framework, which is again gaining a lot of popularity. Why? Simply because you are involving a lot of it's easier for a non-tech or a product to write test cases, and it's basically a framework which talks about the user interaction. You're writing your automation in terms of how the user interacts with the system. So that's your behavior driven framework. And then the last is obviously a hybrid, a mixture of any of the above framework is your hybrid framework. So yeah, the big question, I think, before we go to before I talk about how to successfully set, I think we need to take a step back and understand why most companies fail to have a successful automation. When I say fail, it's not necessary that you don't have automation in place, but fail in different aspects or different areas. I think most companies definitely vouch on automation. They know the importance of why automation is required. They invest a lot of time on it, but somehow they fall back. They fall behind in actually leveraging the benefits of automation. So I want to talk about a little bit more on that. So yeah, the first thing is planning. I think most companies or most teams rather lose out on or kind of fall behind in this phase. So basically, the teams or the company don't, the automation team or the QA team don't spend a lot of time in understanding the product roadmap. So that's where on a longer run, the automation kind of fails. You don't know how your product is, how mature your product is, or what's the future roadmap, or how it's gonna turn up into. So I think getting more clarity there. I mean, obviously you can't have all in a startup or in a startup kind of culture. Things change very drastically, but obviously you should have some sort of a vision where your product is heading and how's your product matured so far. So that brings me to the second point, which is tools. So I already mentioned a lot of tools earlier. I think you have so many tools. So which tool to choose? So that becomes a biggest challenge for any automation team to actually plan out their entire automation. So that's one of the one of the reasons why most teams fail. They don't anticipate how the company is going to grow, or or they look at some tool, not spend so much time. They see, okay, this is a lot easier. Let's adopt this. So they won't invest on the drawbacks and what is the support and what is the costing. So there are a lot of factors in actually choosing the tools. So that's one of the reasons why why automation fails. And the last point is definitely unorganized test cases. I think this is most neglected one. Most companies, I think, from my previous experience, which I'm going to talk a little later, I've seen a lot of them having a lot of unorganized test suits. They're not being maintained, or you have a lot of test cases, or they're basically not written in a smarter way. I think that's very important to actually organize your test cases so that you have one-to-one mapping for your automation as well. So that's really important for a successful automation. To build a successful automation. The next thing is, of course, once most companies somehow get through that phase, they choose a tool, you get started with automation, and then you start writing test scripts. This is where I think major of the companies actually kind of fall behind. Even though they go through the first phase, the second phase is probably the most critical phase. I think, to be very honest, for me, if you ask me what's an automation, is like, it's not just writing test scripts. I think just writing test scripts is not enough. Having it in or running it in your local is not enough. So you should have some sort of a CICD in place. You have a lot of choices for CICD. You could set up a remote, you could set up a on-premise servers, or you could use any of the cloud services, depending on the kind of use case you have. So I think that's very important, like, having a CI/CD, and rather not just running it locally. This somewhat brings me to the third point, which you don't involve devs and engineering team. Whenever you run things locally, and whenever you are only confined within your space, that's where you're not involving a lot of devs or the whole of engineering as a team. That's where I think you need to have the CI/CD, so that your other engineering team gets to see the reports, understand what's happening in the automation space, give feedbacks across, and that's where you start actually having more visibility and more usefulness of the whole of automation. The whole purpose is basically to not just ease out the manual QAs, but also to have more clarity to the devs as well. So they should, so this is the second point. The third most thing is something which is sometimes not under our control, due to various reasons. I think due to the kind of company structure they have, this is something not under our control, but it's also another important factor. I think hiring and training the team is also very important. I think most companies don't spend a lot of emphasis on training folks. I think when I say training, it's not just mentoring or coaching. It's also very important to have regular sessions or regular talks, or some sort of a session, so that team kind of get motivated, they keep learning. That's very important. I think this can be achieved by having a core automation team. I'm always I'm in favor of having a core automation team rather than having just the AQAs. You need an AQA in each of the teams, but having a core team which focuses mostly on developing the automation as a product, developing automation as a whole is very important. Be it training, or be it enhancing your framework, or be it in helping the teammates. So this is why I think that's a very good approach of having a core automation team. Last thing I wanted to talk about is definitely having regular refactoring and enhancing your framework. Obviously, when you start off with automation, you're most companies look for a lot of this numbers, and they look for why, what is the automation coverage, and things to they want to automate as many as possible. Somewhere we kind of fall behind in terms of the quality of the framework or quality of the code we write. That's where I think the core automation team plays a very vital role. You have to spend a lot of time in refactoring and enhancing the framework. That's very important, because say for example, you start any framework or any automation, if for 10 cases, if it's taking a 10-minute kind of a schedule, you should eventually try to improve it further and further. I think that's where regular refactoring and also enhancing the framework is very important. The second thing is obviously setting up a proper QA automation process. It could be your coding standards, it could be a coding review, code reviews. You're looking up at your test cases on a regular basis, cleaning it up, and lastly is definitely you have to have patience. You have to nurture automation. You have to give some time. You have to show patience for an automation to to succeed. So yeah, just a minute. Okay, so sorry, forgot to turn on the light. Okay, so I think a lot of theory have spoken. I think it's I wanted to talk about learning. This is probably my favorite topic. I want to talk about my experiences in my previous organization. To be very honest, I've been fortunate to have worked with a lot of startup and also been part of automation team, building it from scratch. Obviously, there are a lot of failures to learn from. I want to talk about those. The first thing I wanted to talk about during my early days, is about the tools. Earlier, I also mentioned why choosing the right tool is important. So let me give you an, let me share my experience with during my early days in Practo. I was part of the core automation team. Why I say choosing the right tool based on your framework is important is back then. We chose Calabash as an automation tool. Why? Simply because it's easier to pick up, and we did not spend a lot of time in understanding our product. And then we started developing. We started using Calabash, and then we started writing test cases. Initially, it was all happy and very good. The management was very happy, but over a period of time, it's just we spent 6 months when our product grew like 5x or 10x depending on the startup. For me, it was really a fast growth because Practo back then was more of a startup culture, startup then, but then it grew 10x in a very short time. So Calabash became a very rather than solving problems, it became a pain point for the automation team. There were a lot of issues around slowness. There were a lot of flaky tests. It did not support your web application. It was limited only to Android and iOS. We didn't have parallel support. So it started kind of, and also having so many lines of code kind of became a tremendous task for the automation team to actually have the have a fruitful automation. So yeah, so that's where I think the second point comes into the picture. Back then, I think while we chose Calabash, then the team was kind of accustomed to using the easy way of writing automation. So we did not emphasize more on training the folks or exploring new tools. We waited far too long for a failure, and then and that's when we realized that we should explore another tool. So that's where when we started, we chose another similar lines framework, which is our robot framework, which is again similar to Calab, somewhat similar, but it solved a lot of problems, but it still had some drawbacks. So that's when again we did not spend a lot of time understanding the drawbacks, and we did not spend we were already in a back foot, and we had a lot of backlog in our place, and the management started pressurizing in terms of getting the numbers done for automation. We wanted to reduce the entire QA cycle. So we again did not spend more time in training folks or exploring new tools. That's why I think a proper team management is very important. So that's where core mobile team was really helpful. Third thing, of course, your upgrading your regular tools. So as I said, we waited far too long for a tool to fail, and we did not upgrade at the right time, and we left it too late. So that's where you need to actually keep an eye on what's happening around, what are the new stuffs coming, and obviously keep upgrading your existing framework. Look for more improvements. If you think there are if you think if you can by doing this, you can actually forecast the limitations of your framework, and then you could actually parallelly have the team or assign another team to do a POC and try out new tools. So that's where upgrading or regular updates is very important. Lastly is of course working in silos. This was one of our failures back then. so we did not involve a lot of the engineering team. The whole of engineering or the whole of devs had no clue what automation team is doing. Basically, we used to run our automation locally, share have update results on our own in our test management tool. So devs had no clue what's happening in the automation space, what is the automation coverage, how can they utilize, how can they contribute to automation. So automation, so when I say success story for an automation is not just for a manual QA. Of course, it's helping the manual QA to speed up your automation, but also on the other side, when you look at the dev side, it's kind of a you're giving them a freedom to actually get to know their quality upfront. So all they have to, so that's why I said involving devs is very important, so that they get a easy updates on what's happening with their code. They could go and trigger, so that's why CICD is important. They could go and trigger their they could trigger the automation and see what's happening to their build. They can fix it even before it reaches QA. So it's a win-win situation for devs as well as the QA. So I think we should that was a major learning for me back then. Now coming to my latest experience with Settle, I think looking at all these aspects, I think I spent a lot of time in understanding a product, and that's where I eliminated most of them. And then it's okay to take time and build something rather than just building it fast and failing, or you could also go the fast fail approach as well. So yeah, so this is more on the learning side. So yeah, just to summarize on how to set up a successful automation is basically, definitely you should spend a lot of time in knowing your product. That's probably half of your work is done for an automation team. Obviously, your tool selection based on the kind of product you're automating. So that's your second. Then the third comes organizing your test cases in terms of your be it your be how you organize your manual cases. Then obviously defining your automation scope. This is also very important aspect, because obviously you can't automate everything in one go, and automation is not meant to replace manual. Obviously automation is there to help manual or to aid the entire QA or the whole of engineering. So you need to define your automation scope, what needs to be automated, or what are your priorities and stuff. That's your scope for your automation. And then comes my favorite is definitely, I would highly recommend start with your API cases, start automating API cases. That gives you a lot of freedom. Actually, that gives you a lot of insight about your product. You will understand, and because API cases are easier to automate, and as well as they are pretty fast, you kind of eliminate the whole the issues with UI automation. So yeah, API automation is definitely important. And then integrating with CI/CD, as I've told, I think that's also very, very important, rather than just running on your local. Even if it's a single server, you could procure a server, set up your entire automation and try to run it on them, so that it gives so that everybody can access. You are increasing the visibility for your automation via CI/CD. I also highly recommend database automation wherever required, because that's also a pretty easy and a very vital part of your for your product quality. And then of course automate your UI cases once your product matures. Once you know that your product has reached a stage, you can start automating them. Obviously spend a lot of time in enhancing your framework. It could be related to speed or related to quality, of course. And lastly is definitely have some automation process in place. I think once you reach a stage where people are contributing to automation, I think you need to have this in place to have a smoother process. So yep. All right. So lastly, I want to take this opportunity to also shout out that we are hiring. Currently, Settle is hiring for. We're looking for a lot of automation roles. Feel free. I think if anyone's interested, feel free. So, yep, that's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Ashish, for that wonderful presentation. I'm sure you guys have some questions. If you guys do, you guys can drop it in the chat, or you guys can just raise a hand. I will invite you guys to the stage. So, meanwhile, I have a few questions for myself, right? Or maybe on behalf of those who are there, but they're shy to ask. Okay. So, first question is, for those who are starting out, let's say they don't have experience in automation, right? How would you suggest, or how would you advise their learning paths to be?
So for people who are very new to automation, I mean, I would definitely emphasize on understanding the fundamentals. I think, so when you choose, when you're in an organization, you would know what kind of product you're looking to automate, right? So obviously you have clarity on what you want to automate. So so going by that, you know what tools you're looking at. So looking at the tools, obviously spend a lot of time on basics. I think most important aspect is definitely strengthening your fundamentals, understanding different framework, how different framework works. There are a lot of tutorials out there. I think trying it out on your own I mean, that's how I've learned, actually. And not just that, if you have mentorship programs, I think that also helps. For instance, right, like I was very fortunate in my first organization, Amazon. I was a manual QA back then. We had no, we didn't have nothing to do in automation. But then Amazon had this kind of a mentorship program where you could actually tag up with a senior automation guy and learn from a practical knowledge of automation. I think that actually helps.
Understood.
So,
yeah. Okay. I have another question also. Okay, in your experience, right, when you're suggesting tools to a company, because you're starting out a project and you have tools and so on, like you mentioned, there are many tools. So how do you actually convince the management point of view? Because I'm sure there are certain factors which they look into more, right? So can you just say, like, what are the factors they actually invest in?
So I think different companies have different kind of requirement. I think in my previous there were few instances where getting it done faster is very important for them. They want to have quick automation rather than rather than emphasizing on the quality or looking at on a scalability point of view. So in those so in those terms, I think, and during that time, I think it's really difficult. Obviously, you need that support from the management as well, to have the freedom or to have the trust on the automation automation team. Like currently in Settle, we spent close to 6 months not having any automation in place. We were actually developing a lot of a lot of work was on the background. Like we were spending a lot of time in understanding the roadmap, clearing a lot of, organizing a lot of on the manual side, setting up the automation framework. So also having a lot of training in terms of bringing up the automation team. So you need that support as long as you kind of you have that kind of support from the management. I think that's one of the very important aspect, to be very honest.
Okay, understand. Okay, so we have few questions over here. Number one is from Shivali. All right, she asked, from your experience with early stage startups, what's the typical size of a QA team versus dev team?
So in Practo, when back then when I started, right? So we had luckily, I think somehow Practo kind of believed in having a core automation team. So we had a member of three members plus a lead for a core automation team, and then we had like 4 to 5 QAs for your manual side. So luckily we had a strong automation team, which kind of helped us to actually build and scale automation really fast.
Okay. Moving on, next question from Diana. When should we run the smoke test, sanity test, or regression test?
So yeah, I mean, obviously regression tests are usually, it takes a lot of time running your regression automation test. They usually run when you have your regular sprint cycle or regular regression cycle. You run all your test cases, right? So that's when you run your regression. For your smoke, say smoke or sanity, you run them only when during a hot fix. So you have a small minor fixes in one of your segment. You run only those, or probably the most important functionality. So that's how you kind of take a call between which one to run.
Got it. Okay. Next question is from Shafika. She asked, which tools that Settle use now for API and UI automation?
So we've actually built everything from scratch. So we use Selenium for all our web-based application. We use APM and everything in Java. And we use REST Assured for all our APIs. So what we have done is basically we have created a core framework, a core project. And since Settle is not just a consumer-facing app, we also have a lot of other applications as well for merchant side. So we have different sets of mobile application. So we didn't want to have a lot of repositories. So what we did is we created a core project where all your framework related, all your core framework sits in, and any new project comes and says, for tomorrow we venture into a new team, all we need to do is just pull those jars and then start writing your automation scripts.
Understood. Another question from Sai Manokaran. How complex an automation script should be?
I mean, to be very honest, automation script should be as simple as possible. It should not be very complex. I think this is very important. Say suppose when you transit to any team member or any team member looking into your automation scripts, it should be rather be easier because that kind of break down a lot of not just in terms of motivation. It helps someone when you look at complex things, right? I mean, let me share one of the experience in Settle. When I joined Settle, right, there was a vendor team working on automation. Basically there was a dev team. So dev team were writing the automation code. So they had written it so complex that most of our in-house QA team were not even interested to look at, simply because it was so complex and it was it was taking so much time for them to understand. So that's where I spent a lot of time in restructuring them and reorganizing, so that it's a lot easier for any newcomer to pitch in with a minimum effort. Of course you require some effort to be to put in.
Yeah, agreed on that. Okay, next question. We have a lot of questions coming in. Okay, Amir asked, what is some common example of database things that can be automated?
I mean, it depends on case to case. So if you have a lot of data validations, I think that's where I think database testing is very important. In current organization in Settle, we don't do database automation simply because we use a lot of we have tied up with a lot of third-party vendors or third-party services. So that's why it's not a feasible option for us to have a database automation. So it depends on case to case. If you have a lot of data sets, if you want to validate the schema of your entire DB, I think that's where it's important to have database automation.
Understood. Okay. Next question is from Diana again. Okay. What she asks is, at API level, what and how do you test? Is it your acceptance criteria, CRUD operations, or is it end-to-end user journey?
So so there are different parts to this. So in terms of how we do it in Settle, or how we should ideally have it, is basically divided based on your segments. Like when you're testing a new API, obviously you test out all the possible scenarios, or that's on more on your extensive kind of a testing of your API. It could be in fact it also includes your load testing, depending on how much how much load it can take. So that's for the new API. For coming to the existing APIs, which has already been there, I think you need to have some sort of a health checks. I think the regular APIs need to be tested frequently, and also having end-to-end is also very important. Like in our case, all our API automation is end-to-end, so that you have your entire flow being tested rather than single API where you have a separate health check for your single API, where it regularly pings and checks your your API health. So yeah, it has different use case.
All right. Okay. Another question from Shirley. Okay. For standard release, not hotfix release. Okay.
Sorry?
For standard release, which are non hotfixes, how long does automated test takes to complete? For example, as part of CICD or build qualification.
Okay. Okay. I mean, let me take again Settle for an example. So we have close to 250 odd cases, mobile. These are only mobile cases, and close to around 300 API cases. So our API basically run on a nightly basis. We have every day your cases being run, and usually our API back then, when during the early days, it used to take close to 12 to 15 minutes. After continuous refactoring, I think now it just takes less than 3 minutes. We are planning to integrate it with different environment as well. Currently, it is just sitting on staging. It's always good to have it on dev, so that's why I said having regular enhancement is very important. So that's on your API. For your mobile cases, we run them parallelly. So we don't use any cloud services. We obviously Settle was a startup, and all your mobile cloud services are pretty expensive. So we built our own device lab kind of thing. We have procured physical servers where we attach your mobile Android devices, and for iOS, obviously we use simulators. So we run them parallelly across both, be it Android or be it iOS, and it roughly takes close to 60 minutes right now for 200 to 250 cases.
Okay, got it.
So our framework is we've spent a lot of time in enhancing the framework. So that's where it can be extended, and in fact we have shortage of devices. I think if we have more devices, you can easily scale up our automation even without setting up a Selenium grid. We haven't even gone into setting up the grid. We just created we're just running them parallelly using our test engine.
Understood. Okay. Since we are going to be short of time, I'm going to take another few more questions. Okay. So Benji, he asked, how do you avoid duplicate tests from QA and dev?
Sorry?
how do you avoid duplicate tests from QA and dev?
Okay, QA and dev. Okay. This is somewhat confusing. So, I mean, QA, I would rather say you should ideally have one test case. So your one test case should be mapped for your automation as well. So it should have a correlation between your, your manual QA test case as well as your automation test case. So what we do in currently in Settle is basically to have a one-to-one relation, because it's very difficult to track across different products, right? So what we have built is we've built a Jira dashboard, a simple dashboard based on all you need to do is just add labels to your test cases, whether it's pending automation or it has been automated or it cannot be automated. So we add labels, and based on those labels we we pull out our dashboard, and that's where we track the numbers. So whatever numbers are there are. So this also kind of dashboard kind of you can use this as a reference point to your management to actually show them what's happening in the automation space.
Understood. Okay. Last two questions. Okay. Lim Zijian, he asked, how do you deal with third-party vendor API on staging? Have you guys mocked the response from third-party?
So in Settle, I think this is a very tricky part actually, since most of our third-party services or third-party vendors are mostly into banks, or it could be related to wallets, or it could be related to users. So that's very difficult part to actually automate them. Most of them are slightly stricter in terms of exposing staging environment. So yeah, in few cases we mock them. In few we have simulators, like adding a credit card or adding a debit card or topping up. So you require some sort of a simulator or some sort of a mocking. So in some cases, in my previous organization in Astro, which was again a payment gateway which I was working in. So we had the leverage, we had the staging environment from the vendors as well. So yeah, I mean it's a case to case basis actually.
Okay. Second last question actually, because another question came in. Okay, seriously, the last one. Okay. Saif asked, for mobile automation, do you prefer single code base or different code base based on OS?
I personally have tried and tested both. The latter one doesn't work. I think having separate repos will not really be successful. That's my opinion. Because what happens is when you are having them in one single repo will definitely help, because you kind of write both Android and iOS together, so they are in parity. If you segregate them, it kind of becomes very difficult to manage both the repositories. But yeah, obviously in some cases, like in few instances, if your user journeys are very different for your Android and for iOS, it is more meaningful to have separate repos. But I think as far as current scenario, I mean, most of the companies follow similar user journey across Android and iOS. So it's better to have single repository. In fact, I would say have a single repository, even include your APIs as well, because most of your mobile cases, sometimes you require API calls as well, right? I think if you segregate your APIs and having just the mobile, if you can't reuse the API code, so have them together. In fact, in our current setup, we have our web, our mobile, and as well as our API sitting together in one single project. It's just that we have segregated our core project, which is related only to framework, in a separate project.
Okay, all right. Last question for the day. Okay, Wei Bin Chiu, he asked, what are your approaches to avoid flakiness in UI end-to-end testing?
I think flakiness is sometimes it's a very tricky part. I think there's no straightforward answer. I think we still struggle with flaky tests. It's sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes it's obviously there's obviously a limitation in certain tools you use. But yeah, as far as possible, the kind of locators you define, I think that's where you can actually kind of avoid, and also have smarter weights. You write your automation scripts in such a way where you can actually minimize. You can't definitely eliminate flakiness, but you can actually minimize them by having a using the correct locators, or using smarter way of waiting for your page to load, or things like that. Yeah, smaller things will actually help you, but will definitely not eliminate it.
Understood. Okay, I think that was the last question. Okay. Thank you so much, Ashish, for taking so many questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely it's my pleasure, and I really enjoyed this session. Yeah, I mean, we can have more follow-up sessions on if you guys really like want to deep dive more into technical. I think in itself, the aspects, like the topics which I said in itself can be a session. So if you guys are really interested, I think we can have a follow-up session on this. We can have more. We could have a live demo, or we could have a live coding as well. To give more practical examples. So yeah.
Definitely, I'm pretty sure a lot of people there will be interested to see that. Personally, I really enjoyed and I learned a lot. I'm sure others did as well. So hope to see you again on the next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ram. I think it was a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. See you. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay, guys. So moving on to our final part. Please save the date for our next event, which will be taking place on next month on 9th of March, which will be having online. Of course, we are welcoming our speakers, volunteers, and sponsors. So if you guys are interested to give a talk as well, just drop us a message, drop me, Amir, or Nitin, or just in the chat after this. So we're welcoming a lot of speakers as well. So hope to see you guys on the next session. I hope you guys learned a lot today. So I think that's all for today. Thank you so much, everyone. So have a good day. Bye-bye.